Think about this. You're watching your most confident friend, the one who never seems to force anything, yet somehow people gravitate toward them. They're not the loudest in the room. They're not chasing attention. But there's something steady, almost magnetic, about their presence. Meanwhile, maybe you find yourself overthinking, analyzing every message, second-guessing your silence, putting in all the effort and receiving little in return. It feels unfair, doesn't it? Here's the hard truth. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that love is earned through effort, that the more we give, the more someone will value us. But that mindset doesn't create attraction. It drains your energy and gives away your power. Real desire, respect, and connection don't begin when you chase. They begin when you stop, when you stand still, when you embody something ancient and unshakable, Stoic stillness. The Stoics taught that true influence doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from inner strength. And in relationships, that truth holds. You don't need to beg to be chosen. You need to become the kind of presence that doesn't ask for attention. It naturally commands it. That's what we're exploring today. How to shift the dynamic, not through games or manipulation, but by changing how you show up, for yourself first, and then for others. If this already feels like the kind of perspective you've been searching for, wisdom you can apply in the real world, then consider subscribing. It's a simple way to let me know we're walking the same path, building something solid, grounded, and powerful from the inside out. Let's be honest, most of us were taught that love means constant effort, always reaching out, keeping the spark alive by doing more. It sounds noble, even romantic, but in reality it's exhausting. Because when you're always the one reaching out, you're sending a quiet message. I need this more than you do. And that changes everything. The balance shifts. You go from being someone they feel fortunate to know to someone who is simply always available. And here's the truth. We don't chase what we already have. We chase what feels rare, steady, and self-contained. But this doesn't mean playing games. It doesn't mean being cold for the sake of manipulation. That's not Stoicism. That's strategy without substance. The Stoics taught something deeper, self-restraint, the power to act, not from impulse, but from wisdom. Epictetus once said, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." So before you send that text just to feel noticed, pause. Ask yourself, am I reaching out to truly connect, or am I just soothing a moment of anxiety? Attraction isn't built through constant communication. It's built through contrast, through the rhythm of presence and absence. When someone doesn't hear from you for a while, their mind naturally begins to wonder, where are you? What are you doing? Who are you becoming? That gentle space, that silence, it plants a seed. Not because you're playing games, but because you've stepped back and allowed curiosity to do its work. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And often, reaching out again and again isn't about kindness, it's about avoiding silence. Because silence forces you to sit with yourself, with uncertainty, with doubt, and that's uncomfortable. But here's the paradox. The moment you learn to sit in that silence, the moment you stop filling every gap, you become stronger. There's another truth we often miss. When you're always the one who initiates, you take away the other person's chance to invest. You rush the story instead of letting it unfold. Ask yourself, how can someone chase you if you never stop running toward them? Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." And that includes conquering the urge to control how connection develops. So try this. If you're always the one to text first, step back. Not forever, not as punishment, but for 3 days. 3 days of stillness. 3 days of letting things breathe. Observe. Notice who fills the silence, who makes the effort when you don't. Because here's the deeper truth. When you stop rushing to be seen, you notice who is actually looking. When you stop speaking just to be heard, you see who listens in your quiet. And when you stop chasing, you finally give others the space to choose you. This restraint is not weakness, it is strength. Socrates taught that to know yourself is the beginning of wisdom. And every time you resist the pull to overgive, to over-explain, to over-text, you move closer to that wisdom. You become the kind of person whose attention isn't a default, it's a gift. Most people never realize how much of themselves they give away in the very first conversations. We're often so eager to connect, to be liked, to prove we're interesting, that we end up laying everything out at once. Our hobbies, our opinions, our past relationships, every thought and feeling explained in detail. But here's the paradox. When you give someone the whole story up front, they stop reading. There's no suspense, no tension, no space left to wonder. You become familiar too quickly. And as the Stoics reminded us, familiarity often breeds indifference. The ancient philosophers practiced measured expression, not because they feared vulnerability, but because they understood the value of depth. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." That's not only wisdom for life, it's powerful in connection. When you say less, you give others the chance to lean in, to wonder, to fill in the blanks with their own imagination. And it's that curiosity, not oversharing, that draws people closer. Psychology supports this too. Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Transformation doesn't happen when everything is predictable. It happens when there's something unknown, something that stirs emotion. A little mystery, the kind that leaves someone feeling there's more to discover, is what ignites connection. So here's something practical. The next time someone asks what you do for fun, don't give them a list. Instead, leave space for intrigue. Say something like, "Depends on the mood. Sometimes I disappear into solitude. Sometimes I host the kind of dinner that lasts all night." That's not being vague. That's offering a spark of curiosity, just enough for them to want to know more. Now they're not just hearing you, they're thinking about you. Aristotle once said, "The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance." In conversation, this means you don't need to showcase every part of yourself all at once. You only need to share what stirs curiosity. Offer a glimpse of your world, not the entire picture. Let your presence unfold over time, not in a single breath. This doesn't mean you should hide who you are. Not at all. Vulnerability is powerful, but only when it's layered, when it builds slowly, like chapters in a story. What you're really doing is creating pacing, allowing someone time to lean in, time to want more, time to invest. Socrates said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." And when it comes to connection, the same applies. What draws us to people is often the sense that there's more to discover, another layer just out of reach. When someone feels they already know everything about you, curiosity fades. But when there's still mystery, when silence leaves questions hanging, they keep coming back. You don't need to pretend to be mysterious. You just need to stop over-explaining. Speak simply, but with weight. Let the pause linger. Let them wonder. If they ask again, that's the sign it's working. Because people don't chase what's obvious. They chase what sparks wonder. And here's where we get it backwards. We've been told that the more available we are, the more others will value us. That if we always answer, always drop everything, always respond immediately, that will be seen as loyalty, as love. But the truth, Constant presence doesn't raise your value. It erodes it. When your time and attention can be taken at any moment without pause or resistance, people forget that those things carry weight. They forget that your attention is a gift. It's the law of supply and demand. If something is always there, it begins to feel ordinary, familiar. And as the Stoics knew well, familiarity dulls appreciation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." Sit with that for a moment. Think about how often you trade your peace, your silence, your presence, for the hope of being valued, when in reality value is preserved through restraint. If you always place someone else's moment above your own, you're not being generous. You're abandoning yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become yourself? How can you even hear your own thoughts if you're always on standby, available to anyone at any time? That isn't self-awareness. It's self-erasure. Don't confuse kindness with constant availability. Boundaries are not walls. They're standards. And when you stop reacting instantly to every message or request, you're not being rude. You're showing that your time and energy are sacred. Your attention is earned, not assumed. And people feel that difference. They may not admit it, but they respect it. Because deep down, we all value what feels rare. Aristotle taught that knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. That knowledge isn't abstract. It shows up in how you spend your time, and with whom. It means building a life that doesn't pause simply because someone else suddenly remembers you exist. You want others to value your time? Start by valuing it yourself. Here's something practical. This week, say no once. Not to be difficult, but to protect your peace. Let a message sit for an hour before replying instead of answering in 60 seconds. If someone calls while you're in the middle of focused work, finish what you're doing first. That isn't coldness, it's clarity. Your presence isn't a product on a shelf, always available, always in stock. The moment people realize that, they begin to treat it with care. Plato once said, "The good life is one of order, purpose, and harmony. Not chaos, not urgency, not being pulled in 10 different directions by everyone else's needs." When you live from that grounded place, people feel it. And that quiet strength, not your availability, is what draws them in. So set the tone. Slow the pace. Show up when you choose to, not when you're summoned. Because availability doesn't equal value. Self-respect does. And yes, it's a strange feeling, especially when you deeply care about someone. Every part of you wants to stay close, to keep the connection alive, to make sure you're not forgotten. But here's the paradox. The more you chase being remembered, the easier it is to be taken for granted. Here's the paradox. The harder you try to stay close, the more the connection begins to fade. Why? Because too much presence doesn't deepen a bond. It suffocates it. Without space, there's no contrast. And without contrast, there's no curiosity, no spark. Even the warmest fire dies when it's starved of oxygen. Constant contact does the same. It takes the air out of the room. The Stoics understood this deeply. They practiced emotional detachment not to be cold, but to remain in control of themselves. Epictetus once said, "He who is not satisfied with a little is satisfied with nothing." If you cannot be at peace with a little distance, then no amount of closeness will ever truly satisfy you. Real connection isn't about being present every moment. It's about being felt even when you're absent. Carl Jung spoke of the necessity of separation for growth. He said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate what feels important." And sometimes, the most important thing you can communicate isn't through words, it's through silence. By stepping back, You give others the chance to realize your value on their own. Plato taught that everything meaningful passes through stages: formation, contrast, transformation. Relationships are no different. Constant updates and endless check-ins don't allow that process to unfold. They cut off the natural rhythm. If someone never has the chance to wonder where you are or why you're quiet, they never get the chance to miss you. This isn't about playing games. It's about restoring balance. Because when one person is always showing up while the other drifts in and out, it doesn't feel romantic. It feels heavy. The goal isn't to punish with silence. It's to let desire breathe again, to give longing space to surface. Socrates believed that self-awareness is the beginning of wisdom, and part of that wisdom is noticing your own motives. Are you reaching out because you're grounded or because you're anxious? Are you texting to connect or just to feel a response? Presence born of anxiety isn't connection, it's pursuit. And if you are always pursuing, you leave no room for the other person to step forward. So here's the shift. Resist the urge. Not forever, not with hostility, just long enough to let silence do what words cannot. Let your absence speak. Let stillness create value. Let the tension breathe life back into the connection. Because the people who truly matter will move toward you when you stop moving toward them. Those who are meant to be close will notice the silence. They'll feel the gap. They'll want to step in and bridge the distance. And that's when the energy shifts, when attraction returns. Not through force, but through space, through balance, through self-respect. Because in the end, you don't need to be constantly present to be unforgettable. You only need to stop chasing and start allowing. Let the quiet do its work. Let it speak what your words never could. There's something subtle but powerful about the unexpected. Think about it. The most memorable conversations, the people who linger in your mind long after they've gone, they all share one thing: unpredictability. Not wild or unstable, but alive, human, dynamic. They don't move in straight lines. They don't repeat the same rhythm over and over. And that's why we keep thinking of them. They catch us off guard in the best way. The human mind seeks patterns, but it also tires of them. Predictability makes us feel safe, yes, but over time, safety turns into monotony. If someone always texts at the same time, always responds in the same tone, always reacts in the same way, you stop wondering what they'll do next. And when the wondering ends, so does the excitement. And without excitement, there is no chase. The Stoics understood this balance. They valued stability, but they didn't confuse it with flatness. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Change is the key. To live well, to connect deeply, to keep bonds alive, we need movement. Not chaos, but color. Not games, but growth. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's the paradox. When you do accept yourself, you no longer feel the need to be predictable, just to keep others comfortable. You allow all of yourself to exist. Your quiet moments, your bold opinions, your serious side, your playful side. You stop shrinking into patterns and instead expand into your full range. And that expansion carries energy, and energy is contagious. When you're fully alive, when you bring variety and depth into your presence, people feel it. They may not always know why they're drawn to you, but they are. They notice you because you bring something that wakes them up. Most people move through life half asleep, stuck in routines and shallow interactions. When you interrupt that rhythm with even a small spark of surprise, it awakens curiosity. Aristotle said, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." The same applies to relationships. When you bring joy, playfulness, and a touch of the unexpected into your interactions, even the smallest moments feel fresh. A message with a different tone, a playful reply when they expected seriousness, a pause when they expected a reaction. These small shifts create intrigue. So what can you do right now? Break your rhythm. If you always reply instantly, wait an hour. If you always say goodnight, try something playful or offbeat. Be poetic one day, blunt the next. Let people experience the full range of you, not an edited, predictable version. Real attraction isn't about perfection. It's about being authentic and unpredictable. Plato believed love comes from a desire to discover something beyond ourselves, something new and meaningful. If your actions are always predictable, you take away the joy of discovery. And discovery is where real emotion lives. Here's a simple challenge. Do one small thing this week that surprises someone. Call instead of texting. Share something you've never mentioned. Shift your tone slightly. Let them feel a spark of unpredictability, not to impress, but because you are fully present, fully alive. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to let more of yourself come through. Stoicism isn't about being stiff or robotic. It's about moving with intention, and part of that is knowing when to shift the rhythm. When you bring that awareness into your presence, people don't know exactly what to expect. And that's exactly why they keep coming back. There's also a quiet power in saying less, especially when it comes to compliments. Compliments are most meaningful when they are rare, real, and rooted in presence. When given constantly, early, or without thought, they lose their value. What starts as warmth begins to feel like approval-seeking. People sense it, not always consciously, but they feel it when attention and praise are handed out too freely before it's truly earned. Complimenting too freely signals a lack of self-containment, as if you're trying to win someone over with words. But here's the truth. What's earned is respected. What's given too easily is overlooked. Compliments aren't bad, but when overused, they lose impact and can even lower how others perceive your value. The Stoics taught restraint, not just in action, but in expression. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be one." In the same way, don't endlessly praise someone just to be liked. Instead, be attentive. Notice details. Speak with purpose. When you do speak, your words carry weight, not because they're louder, but because they're rarer. Carl Jung had a similar view on authenticity. You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. The same applies to connection. It's not about how many nice things you say. It's about how grounded you are when you say them. Are your compliments automatic, or are they observed, specific, and earned? One well-placed compliment, delivered with presence and sincerity, resonates far more than a dozen casual ones offered just to maintain attention. Here's where it becomes powerful. In a world where validation is cheap and given freely, your silence becomes meaningful. When someone is used to receiving constant praise and you don't jump in immediately, it creates space. It builds tension, mystery, curiosity. That pause, that absence, is magnetic. It creates an emotional contrast people remember. Socrates believed that true wisdom begins with knowing how little you know. Observe more, speak less. By not rushing to praise, you demonstrate discernment. You show that you're not easily impressed, and that when you do offer validation, it actually matters. This doesn't mean withholding affection or closing yourself off emotionally. It means being intentional. Wait until it feels genuine, and then express it simply, clearly, without exaggeration. A single honest compliment about presence, thought, or character can leave a lasting impression, far more than repetitive praise about appearance or surface-level traits. Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something." Compliments are no different. Those that come from stillness, attention, and truth are the ones people replay in their minds long after. Here's your challenge. The next time you're about to send a casual, "You're so cute" message, pause. Observe instead. Let them feel your attention, before they hear it. Then, when the right moment comes, speak something that carries weight. That is the kind of compliment people remember, not because it flatters their ego, but because it feels real. And real is rare. Some of the most powerful moments happen in silence, not in noise, not in explanations, but in the still space between words where something deeper settles. It's in those pauses that people truly feel connection, not because you said more, but because you allowed the tension to breathe. Here's the catch. Most people cannot sit with silence. It makes them uneasy. It feels like a void that must be filled. So they rush, they ramble, they respond too quickly, not from confidence, but to avoid discomfort. But discomfort isn't always the enemy. Often it is the doorway to something real. The Stoics understood this. They practiced restraint, not just in action, but in expression. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That includes how you react to silence. When a conversation lulls, or when someone goes quiet, do you panic, or do you lean back, breathe, and let the moment unfold? Carl Jung wrote, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing, which makes my life worth living." Silence, inward and outward, creates space for clarity, and clarity allows for deeper connection. When you resist the urge to speak just to fill the moment, you send a powerful message: I am at ease with myself. And that, more than any clever text or perfectly timed reply, is what draws people in. Magnetism begins in stillness. Socrates, the father of questioning, believed that wisdom begins in wonder. But wonder doesn't grow in constant talking. It grows in pause, in the spaces between words. Let a question hang a moment longer than usual. That delay, that breath, invites curiosity. It stirs reflection, and reflection is where real connection begins. Think about rhythm in music. It's not just the notes that move us, it's the silence between them. The silence gives the melody shape. Conversation works the same way. If you're always speaking, always explaining, always rushing to respond, there's no space for the other person to feel your words. But when you pause, even briefly, something shifts. They lean in, they wonder, and that leaning in, that's attraction being born. Aristotle said, "The more you know, the more you realize you don't know." Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is hold back. Say less. Trust that your presence, your silence, and your calm speak volumes. You don't have to explain everything. You don't need to follow every message with another. Let the conversation breathe. Let your energy sit quietly in the room. If someone is curious, they'll come forward. If they're not, no amount of filler will change that. Silence isn't emptiness. It's invitation. It's mystery. It's the space where emotional gravity forms. In a world rushing to respond, the person who can pause stands out. That stillness becomes magnetic, not because you try, but because you are centered. Next time you're in a conversation, resist the reflex. Let a message sit before you reply. Let a question linger before you answer. Let your presence speak without noise. Mastering the pause doesn't just make you heard, it makes you felt. There's an unspoken energy people notice immediately. Not surface-level energy, but quiet, steady confidence that says, "I know my worth." The most magnetic energy doesn't chase, beg, or perform. It chooses calmly, clearly, and with self-respect. You don't need to announce your options. The people who truly have them don't. They move differently. Their words have weight, because they're not trying to convince anyone. Their presence holds value. Because they're not desperate to be seen, that quiet confidence alone makes people want to be chosen by them. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of self-sufficiency. Seneca said, "He who is content is rich." When you already feel whole, No one can control you with attention or approval. You're not out here begging for love. You're deciding who deserves access to your peace. That is real, lasting power. People feel it, even if they don't consciously realize it. They sense when someone isn't trying to prove anything. Carl Jung once observed, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And it's true, because once you fully accept yourself, you stop needing someone else's validation to feel secure. You stop shrinking. You stop editing your words, your personality, your needs, just to get someone to like you. You don't need them to choose you. You've already chosen yourself. Think about this practically. Ever notice how differently you speak to someone when you're not emotionally attached to the outcome? When you're not waiting for approval, you're more relaxed, more playful. You don't overthink every word. That grounded, natural version of you, that's the version people chase. It feels real. It feels alive. But when you act like one person is your only shot, like this is your only chance at connection, love, or attention, it shows. You try too hard. You overcompliment. You filter your opinions. You laugh at things that aren't funny. Slowly, without realizing it, you move out of alignment with yourself. And the person on the other end, they can feel it, not through words, but through energy. But through tension, through restless energy, the vibe shifts, and often not in your favor. Plato said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power. Emotional power, the ability to walk away, to stand still, to choose your response, is one of the most valuable strengths you can cultivate. When you speak like someone with options, not because you're bluffing, but because you genuinely feel that freedom, it changes everything. Your tone shifts. Your posture shifts. The way people listen when you speak changes. Here's a simple self-check. The next time you're around someone you're interested in, ask yourself, am I being real or am I performing? If your tone is laced with nervous energy, if your words are built to impress rather than express, pause, breathe, recenter. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. The right ones will recognize it without the pitch. Socrates taught, to find yourself, think for yourself. Stop bending to fit into someone else's story. Create your own. Make decisions rooted in your values, not in fear of being alone. When your presence comes from peace, not pressure, people feel safe around you. They feel intrigued. They feel drawn in. And in that space, you don't need to chase anyone. They come to you, not because you announced your options, but because you carry yourself like someone who already knows them. There's a subtle, often unnoticed moment when you shift from confidence to chasing. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It shows up in small ways. Saying yes when you mean no, laughing at a joke that didn't land, waiting hours for a text that never comes, or giving more than you're receiving and calling it loyalty. If you're not careful, it becomes a pattern. You start showing up like an audience in someone else's life, clapping for their presence, instead of standing like the main character in your own. Let's be clear. You are not a side note in someone else's story. You're not here to beg for crumbs of attention or prove your worth to people who don't recognize it. And yet so many of us do exactly that. We pedestalize others. We treat their affection like a trophy. We tie our self-esteem to their reactions. Slowly, without realizing it, we become performers in our own lives, hoping to be liked rather than simply being ourselves. This is exactly what the Stoics warned against. Marcus Aurelius said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, think, or do, only what you do. That is real confidence. Quiet confidence. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't place others above it. It simply moves through the world with a strong spine and a calm heart." Aristotle spoke of virtue as the balance between extremes, not too much, not too little. In relationships, that balance is everything. Be kind. Give yes, absolutely. But if you're constantly the one giving while the other simply receives, that's not balance. That's imbalance disguised as love. People don't respect what's handed to them too easily. They respect what feels earned, not because it's manipulative, but because effort creates meaning. Here's the shift. You are the prize. Not because you're perfect, not because you have more followers, better looks, or clever words. You are the prize because you know your value, and you're not afraid to walk alone if it's not matched. That calm assurance that you don't need to be chosen to feel whole is magnetic. People lean toward it. They chase it. Because deep down, everyone is looking for someone who doesn't need them, but still chooses them. And that kind of choice is rare. Socrates said, "Know thyself." Part of knowing yourself is asking hard questions. Am I overgiving because I want to, or because I'm afraid to lose them? Am I showing up grounded, or am I hoping they'll give me a reason to feel worthy today? These questions aren't easy, but they're necessary. They cut through illusion and bring you back to your center. Here's a practical step. Every time you feel the impulse to overextend, over-explain, or over-text, pause. Just pause. Ask yourself, am I acting like the prize right now? If the answer is no, that's your signal. Reset. Reclaim your energy. Step back into your worth, not with arrogance, but with quiet authority. Because the truth is, when you show up as someone who values their peace, their time, their presence, people notice. You don't have to say a word. That energy speaks for itself. And the ones who are meant to walk with you, they'll recognize it. They'll match it. So stop clapping for people who wouldn't clap for you. You are not the audience. You are the whole show. And it's time to start acting like it. There's a moment you feel it. A shift in tone. A delayed reply. A changed rhythm. You notice it in your gut before your mind has words for it. Something's off. The warmth starts to cool. The presence you once felt begins to fade. And instinctively, that familiar urge arises to reach, to fix, to prove that you're worth staying for. You want to explain, to clarify, to fight the current, to hold tighter. But what if, instead of clinging, you chose to let go first? Not out of spite, not to play games, but from a place of deep self-awareness, from stillness, from the kind of clarity that only comes when you realize your worth is not something to defend or explain. It's something you own, quietly, fully, without compromise. The Stoics were masters of this emotional control. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You cannot control how someone feels. You cannot force connection. But you can control your response, your energy, and your choice to walk away with your peace intact. That is the highest form of self-respect. Carl Jung captured this beautifully when he said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." You are not the unanswered messages. You are not the silence on the other end. You are not the version of yourself that keeps shrinking to stay liked. You are your boundaries, your choices, your willingness to leave a room when your presence is no longer seen for what it truly is. Plato taught that love is a pursuit of wholeness, a recognition of something noble and complete in another. But when the dynamic feels like a one-way street, that's not love. That's imbalance. Staying too long in imbalance teaches your nervous system to settle for survival over connection. It teaches your spirit to tolerate crumbs. And what you tolerate, you train yourself to expect. Leaving first doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't need announcements or burned bridges. It's subtle, felt more than seen. You simply pull your energy back. You stop performing. You stop chasing conversations. You stop waiting to be chosen and choose yourself instead. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." That includes the emotional patterns we repeat. Are you staying in situations that chip away at your dignity, shrinking to be digestible, over-explaining your worth to people who've already made up their minds? These questions are hard, but they lead to freedom. When you leave first, from a place of inner calm, not wounded pride, something shifts. You're not running. You're not avoiding. You're simply acknowledging that what once felt aligned no longer does. And instead of distorting yourself to fit what's changing, you step back with clarity, presence, and quiet authority. You honor the shift by walking, and that quiet, measured exit, head held high, carries weight. Most people expect you to cling, to chase, to beg. But when you don't, when you choose peace over panic, they notice. Silence speaks with a gravity no explanation ever could. Aristotle believed the highest form of happiness comes from living a life of virtue and self-realization. That means taking the hard road when it aligns with your truth. That means saying, "This isn't for me," even when it hurts. Peace isn't always found in fixing things. Sometimes it's found in letting go. If the vibe feels off, trust it. Don't write another paragraph trying to salvage what someone else has stopped investing in. Don't send another message hoping to revive what's already fading. Pull your energy back, softly, firmly, completely. The person who walks away with grace doesn't just protect their dignity, they become unforgettable. Sometimes that stillness, that silence, says everything words never could. There's something unmistakable about someone who doesn't need the room to like them in order to feel whole. They're not performing. They're not trying. They're simply anchored in who they are. And somehow, without a single word, people lean in. That's the energy you can't fake, the kind that comes from inner work. Calm, centered, confident. Not in a loud, look at me way, but in a way that quietly declares, I am already complete, with or without your approval. This energy doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It simply is. It doesn't shrink to fit someone else's comfort. It stands tall, makes eye contact, speaks only when it has something real to say. You've probably seen it. Maybe you've even felt it. That rare sense of self-possession that doesn't need to be loud because it's already solid. Most people chase love, not because they are incomplete, but because they feel something missing. They seek validation, attention, a sense of worth, from others, not themselves. They run from person to person, moment to moment, hoping someone will give them what they haven't given themselves. But here's the paradox. The more you crave being wanted, the less magnetic you become. The more grounded you are in yourself, the more people naturally want to be around you. That's the power of what the Stoics called ataraxia, a state of deep, unshakable inner peace. Not coldness, not emotional detachment, but a calm soul that stays steady, no matter who walks in or out of the room. Marcus Aurelius said it best. He who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe. When your inner world is aligned, your outer world reflects it. You stop chasing people to feel enough. You stop trying to fit into spaces that don't honor you. You stop proving, and instead, you begin choosing. Carl Jung once said the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And he was right. To accept yourself means facing your shadows, sitting with your silence, owning your past, without letting it define your present. But once you do, something shifts. You no longer search for someone to fill your cracks. You become solid. Anyone who enters your life becomes a bonus, not a bandage. Plato believed true balance comes when we rise above the loud cravings of the ego and tune into something deeper. When we stop trying to be chosen and start asking, what am I choosing? Clarity emerges. And that clarity changes the way you walk, the way you speak, and the way you let others enter your life. Imagine your life as a home. If it's empty and echoing, anyone can walk in and feel important. But if it's already full, with joy, peace, purpose, and solitude, then anyone who enters must bring value. They don't come to fix you. They come to add to you. That's how healthy love works. It's not two halves trying to make a whole. It's two whole people building something greater together. Socrates said, "The greatest way to live with honor is to be what we pretend to be." In a world full of curated personas and constant social approval, the truly grounded, whole people rise quietly above the noise. They don't announce their value. They embody it. And that embodiment speaks louder than any words ever could. Here's the quiet truth no one teaches. When you become someone who doesn't need anyone to feel worthy, people notice. You become rare. You become the one they remember, the one who's not afraid to be alone, who walks in peace, speaks with depth, and gives without losing themselves in the process. So build your life like it's already enough. Fill your days with what feeds your soul. Become someone who adds value to themselves first. Because when you do, you stop searching for someone to rescue you and start attracting those who simply want to run beside you. That's when everything changes. Not because you were chasing them, but because you've already chosen yourself. True power begins the moment you stop chasing and start becoming. When you move through life grounded in your own worth, you don't just attract attention, you command respect. If this message resonated with you, there's another video on your screen that will take you even deeper on this journey. Keep watching, keep reflecting, and keep growing. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Mindset Mastery. Your presence here matters more than you realize. Until next time, stay calm, stay clear, and keep becoming someone even silence can't ignore.